1 Samuel 16, verse number 11. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Are here all thy children? And he said, There remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. Just as a little bit of a backstory, here in a couple of weeks, which is going to be the Sunday going into New Year's, we're going to do a baby dedication. Originally, when the Lord gave me this thought, I thought it was going to be for New Year's, but He hadn't given me a thought for today, and I wondered why that was until this week, and the Lord kind of worked it out, and so the Lord said, "Why don't you just move up the one that you got in the smokehouse?" I said, "All right then." A lot of times I don't know if the messages are fully complete. You know, I work on them sometimes all the way up to the pulpit, and that's just kind of the way it goes for me. I'm about to use some Southern double negatives and all that, but it ain't never made me. No, never mind. I don't care how long it takes to get what God says. I just want to get what God says. And we've got enough sermons and outlines out there on the internet and other places that the whole world could be saved if they just read them and listen to them. But understand this, when God is speaking to us corporately or individually, what we need is to hear from heaven. We need to hear from God. We don't necessarily need to hear what I think or what anybody else thinks. We certainly don't need to hear the American political version of the gospel. What we need to hear is the gospel. We need to hear what thus saith the Lord. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that I'm the smartest guy that's ever done this, because I'm not. I don't even deserve to be here today. I mean, hear me well when I tell you that. A lot of y'all just know this version of me. Y'all don't know the 30-year ago version of me. And some of y'all do, and you're still here, and I love you. And but I know 30-year-old version of y'all too, and trust me, we don't want to swap secrets, I promise. But most of mine is not a secret. I found out that majority of my life is kind of put out there. And I say this not bragging or boastful, because there's parts of my life I don't like to talk about, just like y'all don't like to talk about. But I remember the day that I made a resolution to follow Christ. In my heart, my mind was made up, and I knew that I was going to fail. I knew when I got up from praying, that was the closest that I was ever going to be to God. That few seconds of me praying and accepting the forgiveness of God and His salvation, that few seconds was as close as I was ever going to be to the cross. And until my life was over and I literally stand in the presence of God. Can I tell you something this morning? The world, the devil, even our own selves, our own flesh, wars against our mind. There is a battle going on for your heart today. And for the Christian, those who are truly born again, that battle is fought right here. Because the enemy would have you believe this morning that resolutions ain't meant for nothing. Well, I'll tell you this. If you make a resolution, the best thing you can do is keep it. The Bible says it's better not to even make a vow than make a vow and break it. So if you make up your mind this morning to do something for God in 2027 or 2026 or 2028 or whatever year out ahead of you, or you got a goal you're going to meet by 2035 or whatever, work towards those things. Work very hard toward doing what you set your mind to do. This morning, it seemed like that has nothing to do with the verse I just read. But I believe it's got everything to do with the verse I just read. What I just read and what I just said seemed to have nothing to do with the title that you see on the screen. How many of y'all know what the little arrow means? I hate math, so I thought I'd just stick something in there with a little mathematical understanding to it. It means greater than. Pasture is greater than parade. We're all very familiar with the story that comes next. Almost everybody in this room who's above the age of 15 remembers the story of David and Goliath. You may not know all of the underlying details or the behind the scenes stuff or anything that was said in the in-betweens and the information that falls through the cracks. But we've all heard the story of how David goes into the valley of Elah and he picks up 5 smooth stones. And I'm going to leave out Coach Hollis's version of this, amen. But he's got one he tells, and it's pretty motivating if you're about to go on the football field. And he goes out and he picks up these 5 stones. And we know that he only used 1 stone. We know that, well, you may or may not know, Goliath had 4 brothers. They're big dudes too. And the Bible names them all out. I believe David got a stone for all of them. Because I think he thought if he was going to kill one, he was going to have to kill them all. And can I tell you, that's the mindset that David had. But before David ever got to the valley of Elah, David was in Saul's tent, the king of Israel's tent, playing on the harp. Because David was a cunning musician. He was a skilled musician and a pretty good singer. Matter of fact, that's why I believe he is credited with writing many of the Psalms. A lot of the Psalms are just songs. He had a poet's heart, he had a poetic mind, he was a skilled musician, and he was a good singer. David would have made a great worship leader. He could do it all. But on top of being all that, we know that David turned into a great warrior. But what about before that? What about the David before that? Well, we're told a few things about the David before that, after the fact. But here in 1 Samuel 16, something very remarkable is taking place. There is an instruction comes, a command comes from God to his prophet Samuel, and he tells Samuel to leave the valley, to leave to leave that place, and to go to the house of Jesse, because he is going to anoint the next king. Immediately, Samuel believed that Saul would have him killed. So the Lord tells Samuel what to do. How many knows this morning, if you just listen to God instead of listening to your fear, if you listen to what God, give God time to answer you and allow God to instruct you on how to do things, you'll be a lot better off. But he goes out and he says, go to Jesse's house, take a sacrifice with you, and tell him you're just there to sacrifice. And once you get to the house of Jesse, from there on, I will tell you what to do. Samuel goes, the preacher goes, he has no idea what exactly he's going to be seeing when he gets there. And he doesn't even really at the time know who he's going to anoint. And that bothers most of us, because we live in a society now where we think we have to know it all. We think as soon as something comes up that we need all the answers. And here's the reality. We don't have all the answers. Life is not about foreknowledge for us. Life is about adjusting and figuring out how to operate in the space of grace that God gives us. He allows us to go through life to have a greater understanding on the other side of these issues and struggles and troubles. Oftentimes, in the fray of things, we think that God does not see us. But in this story, we're going to see 3 major things going on here. Number 1, God sees you where you are. In verse 7, the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. You don't have to chase spotlight. You don't have to chase fame. You don't have to chase prestige. You don't have to chase any of that stuff. What you need to chase is the presence of God. You need to chase His face. That's all you need to do really in life. If you will in any aspect of your going ons, and I know we think sometimes the Lord don't want nothing to do with my occupation. I beg to differ. I think if we could get to a place where God becomes number one for us, and we don't have to chase the spotlight, we can see God do great things. Our problem is we don't think God knows where to find us when we need Him. Well, before David ever stepped out on the battlefield, David already had an understanding that God knew exactly where he was. And God knew exactly how to find David. And David didn't have to go out looking for God to show up. He understood that God was with him, and wherever he went, God was going to show up. If we could only learn to live like that in our day-to-day lives, we could see amazing things happening in our community. We'd see extraordinary things happening in our church. We'd see extraordinary things. I mean, the blessings that we've never experienced before, the power of God in a way we've never experienced it, happening in our own communities, in our towns, on our job sites. But we got to understand that we can't rehearse for the role. What we need to do is focus on discipleship, focus on being committed, focus on staying the course, focus on just standing in the storm sometimes. Sometimes all you can do is take it. In the 78th Psalm, verse 70, the Bible said that he chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds, from following the ewes, great with young. He brought him to feed Jacob and his people, and Israel his inheritance. See, sometimes we think that God just miraculously just plucked David out and just stuck him in there. That's not what happened. See, Saul called for David to come and play the harps and the tenors. And the reason Saul called for David is because other people said, hey, one of Jesse's boys is a skilled musician. He can play, he can sing, he writes his own music, man. This dude is legit. If you just bring him here, he'll help you. Well, why did Saul even need that kind of help to start with? It's because the Bible tells us now, and I know we don't like to say things like this, but the Bible is very clear that God allowed, the word evil is used here, but it wasn't an evil spirit. It was a burdening spirit. It was a spirit, it was a heaviness that God put on him because Saul had done some things that he was not supposed to do. And he had inserted himself into a spiritual place where he had no right to be. His place was to be king. His place was not to be prophet. God had a prophet. He didn't need somebody trying to be somebody else. And let me just say this to you. Stop trying to be somebody that you are not. Those of you that have said in my meetings, when people who come to me want to be a member of the church, I try to have meetings and I try to be real honest. They're very simple. They're very informal. They're not real in depth. But I have one or two big rules. And the big rule is, number one, be yourself. Be who you are. If you like Alabama or Auburn or Tennessee, really, we're going to take jabs at each other. That's all fine. That's fun and games. But if you got a checkered past and you're still struggling with some things, it's okay to struggle with some things. Be yourself. If you don't have a lot of understanding about the Bible, if you aren't really raised around it and you struggle with comprehension like I do and many others do, I have to read things 10, 12, 13, 14 times. Sometimes I say, God, I wish you'd just tell it to me straight. God say, read it out loud, and boom, there it is. Sometimes when you want to hear God speak to you, read the word out loud. I struggle with that, but I'm trying to be honest about it so that you can be honest about it. It's okay. Be who you are. Be yourself. I cannot help somebody when I do not know who you are. If you're spiritually bipolar and you're over here one day and over here the next day, I can't never tell which way you're going. It's impossible for me to try to be a help to you. Be who you are. Secondly, in spite of whatever you're going through, in spite of whatever you're dealing with, genuinely try to be nice to people. When you get into the house of God, this is not a battle zone in here. It should never be a war zone. We should not use this place as a place to attack. and go after each other. And if I know it's happening, I want to do my best to try to stop it if I can. Here's the thing. Genuinely be nice to each other. We're just fulfilling the first and the second of the greatest commandments that Jesus said. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Secondly, love your neighbor as yourself. If you can do those things, all the law and the prophets hang on it. Why am I saying that this morning? I'm just telling you this. God knows who you are. God knows where you came from, and God knows what you're going through. He sees you. He's abundantly aware of what is happening in your life. And you may think that nobody's willing to help you, that maybe God is not willing to help you. Can I tell you, just like David understood it, God has already picked you out, or you wouldn't even be here today. Trust God where you are. He sees you. He understands you. Secondly, faithfulness in small things is what's going to prepare you for greater things. The same qualities that made David a good shepherd would eventually make David a great king. And those qualities are this: diligence, care, courage, and consistency. He was diligent in the things that God told him to do. He just went when God said go. He cared about Israel. He cared about his clan. He cared about his people. He cared. He cared to a fault. Sometimes the people in his life would try to undermine him. His own sons would overthrow him. And when they lost their lives in those battles, David was mourning and grieved in his spirit about it because he cared. He didn't want that to happen. And when it did, he cared. But David also had great courage. We preached about Psalm 51 last week. You know, the thing about having courage is sometimes even when you're the one at fault, even when all the blame's on you, sometimes the most courageous thing to do is just own that. Stop looking for somebody to lay the blame off on. Stop trying to shift it to everybody else in your life and just take responsibility for what you do. When we can do those things, then we can have some courage about us. A lot of us are willing to go out there and sling the knife and sling the machete and point the gun and shoot the gun. We're willing to do those things, but we're not willing to be courageous enough to be responsible for ourselves. And that's what God's looking for. But you also got to be consistent. And you may think David is, some of y'all that don't know, if you don't know David's life, David is not, I'm going to tell you the one thing David was consistent at, making bad choices. He made them over and over and over and over again. He was the epitome of somebody who could be on the mountaintop one day and in the bottom of the valley the next day. That's why David's famous for saying things like, "Where can I go that I can escape thee? If I make my belly in hell, you're there. If I ascend to the highest of heaven, behold, you're there. I can't go anywhere that you're not. Everywhere I go, you are there." Jesus said, Luke 16, "He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. He that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much." Can I tell you, God's not looking for us to be perfect, but God's looking for us to be honest. And when we can be honest about how big of failures we actually are in the day-to-day things that we like to hide in the corners and shovel under the rugs and the carpets and cover up, we're covering up a lot of stuff. If we just be honest with ourselves and honest to God about it, then we would consistently, I told you last week, what made David the apple of God's eye was not his ability to kill giants, and his ability to lead armies, or his ability to lead kingdoms. That was not what made him the apple of God's eye. What made him the apple of God's eye is his attitude of repentance. He was constantly having to say, "It's me again, Lord. I'm here and my head's hung in shame. It's me again. They didn't do it. I did it. And I need you to help me." Zechariah 4, the prophet said, "Who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel." With those 7. Listen, just because you think God is not doing it doesn't mean that God has forsaken you. Sometimes God's answer is, hold on a minute. Sometimes his response to us is, it's not yes, it's not no, but I'm not ready to tell you the answer just yet. You got to learn some things. For the Christian, the yes and the no is all kind of relative. We've got stuff we have to learn, and we have to learn them in the yes, and we have to learn them in the no. If you're going to make a New Year's resolution for next year, can I challenge everybody in the room this morning to make the same resolution? And that is to just be faithful. Be faithful in showing up. Be faithful in your living. Be faithful in your giving. Be faithful in your repentance. Be faithful. Show up for the Lord like you show up for your football team. Show up for God like you show up for your job. Preacher, you tell me I got to be here every time the door's open? No. But if you want to learn more, you will. If you want to be encouraged and have opportunity to encourage, you will be here as often as you can. Preacher, do I got to volunteer for everything under the sun? No. But if you want to be a blessing instead of just receiving blessing, volunteer for stuff and do something for somebody else instead of just taking it all for yourself. Those are things that people do not ever understand, the blessing that you get out of serving when nobody else is watching. When you're not getting pats on the back, that's when you'll have the biggest smiles on your face. When nobody sees what you do and you don't expect anything in return, that's the overflow. And when you're giving that stuff and you're getting the blessings that only God can give, that means you're not getting them from people, you're getting them from God. Nothing is greater than being faithful in the small things. You'll find out in life, being prepared for greater things. Y'all know I've told this before about my affinity for the show Vikings and how I loved that whole backstory, the way they wrote that about Ragnar Lothbrok. I love that show. You can learn a lot of stuff. Or you can learn a lot of stuff you don't need to know either. However, one of the greatest moments of that show was when he walks down off the mountain. He'd been gone for years, and everybody thought he was dead. They were down there arguing. His sons are all arguing over who's going to be the next king. And he walks in and plants a sword in the ground, and he screams to the top of his lungs, "Who wants to be king? Who's willing to die for it? Who's willing to take on all this stress? Who's willing to put everybody else's well-being ahead of their own? Who's willing to do what it takes to lead from the front?" And I'm going to tell you something, church. A lot of times, I don't want to do this right here. If I'm just being transparent, there's times in my life where I would just like to quit. I get tired of the spiritual abuse. Not saying y'all, I'm not trying to say y'all are spiritually abusing me. I'm just saying I get tired of fighting the fight on every front, every single day, because they come whether you like it or not. Whether you're trying to add to it or not is irrelevant. I'm still fighting the fight. That's why it doesn't bother me. A lot of times, some of y'all stuff is a welcome distraction from what I got going on the other side of it. I don't mind it. My phone rings a lot. I get text messages a lot. I get Facebook messages a lot. Those are just things. I try to deal with it as fast as I can and move, because I got something else to move on to. It is what it is. I don't mind that. What I consider that's my responsibility. Those are small things to me that I'm trying to be faithful in to try to help myself and prepare myself for the greater things that are coming. I know that I can't be everywhere and everything to everybody. But like I always say, I can't do everything, but I can do some things. And I need to be faithful in the things that I can do. And that's all I'm asking from you. Make a resolution today. Don't even wait till the new year to start. Make a resolution to be faithful. Be as faithful as you can to the Lord in your relationship with Him. Before David ever stood before a giant, David had stood in danger. We'll get there in just a minute. But the third point, God's timing never requires your self-promotion. David never had to promote himself. He never had to push. He never had to post about it on social media. He never had to make stickers about it or signs about it. He never had to run for office. No offense to anybody who is. He didn't have to do that. I want to take you back to the story that we read in verse 11. Samuel went to Jesse's house. And the Bible said that Samuel beckoned. He sent word ahead and said, Jesse, bring your boys out here. I want you to go ahead and prepare yourself. Go ahead and clean yourself up. You know, here's one of the things that I love. The Bible said that in verse number 6 it came to pass, or excuse me, verse number 5, he said, peaceably I am come to sacrifice unto the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and called them to the sacrifice. So the prophet Samuel goes and sanctifies himself. He tells them to get sanctified, and all that means is clean yourself up. Get cleaned up and get ready to come with me. So they clean themselves up. They put on some clean clothes, and they wash themselves off. They shined up their battle dress, and they're standing there. They're ready to go. And then Samuel comes up to them, and then he sanctifies them spiritually. He goes to the Lord on their behalf and sanctifies them and asks God to make sure that they're clean, and that at that very moment right there, they're spotless. And he asks God to have favor on them and look at them, make sure they're ready to go. And then he leads them out. There's a parade of sorts happening in the town. And they go out and they're standing there. And there's 7 of them. Now, if y'all know, I love biblical numerology. Immediately my brain starts running numbers. Well, I'm thinking, man, that's completeness right there. That's God saying, that's enough. That's good. Everything's fine and dandy right here. But as one by one, as the boys start to be examined by the prophet, Samuel knows that he's done his part, and he can tell by their appearance that they've done their part. But God steps in, and God says, Samuel, I know what I'm doing better than you. I'm not looking on the outward. That's all you can see. I'm looking on the inward. I'm looking at their heart. And I know more about this bunch than you ever thought to know about them. So just trust me. And Samuel starts going over them one by one. God said, nope, that ain't him. So he goes to number 2. Nope, that ain't him. All the way down through number 7. And he gets there, and Samuel's sitting there, and you can imagine his struggle in his mind. He says, nope, that ain't him. Well, Samuel had been out at the battlefield, and Samuel knew that Jesse had 7 sons. And he said, Jesse, didn't I tell you to bring all your boys here? Jesse said, yeah, they're here. Look at them. He said, do you not have one more? He had an 8th son, and his name was David. David was a good-looking kid. I mean, he was the baby. He was ruddy. He was a smart kid, the brainiac of the bunch. We know now that he had learned to play music, and he had learned to write songs, and he could sing. And we know now that David was a good fighter. He was the Old Testament equivalent of Uriah Faber. He was the sexy-looking warrior that God planted on the battlefield. He was the California kid of Bethlehem, Ephrathah. He was the guy you wanted to be around. Everybody loved him. Smiled good, looked good, smelled good, sang good. But Samuel didn't know him. And he said, Jesse, do you not have one more? Yeah, I got one. But the King James Bible said, behold, he's keeping the sheep. Jesse said, So if I could just use modern English, he's like, yeah, I got another one, but he's not really who you're looking for. That's not really the one that you want, Samuel. Surely you don't mean him. Well, I got studying this week. Y'all know me. Once I realized that this was going to be where I was going, and as the Lord would have it, and he speaks to just an old idiot like me, he began to stir in my heart, and he said, "Where are you getting your thinking from that Jesse had just hid David down there? What makes you so sure that Jesse is the one that sent David to the field to watch the sheep?" So I get to looking. And as I'm searching the scripture, you know what happens? The Bible begins to speak for itself. The Bible never said that Jesse sent David anywhere. David chose to go to the fields because David never thought he was worthy enough to be anointed as the next king. David didn't think he was worthy enough to stand with great warriors of the Jewish army. David understood things about himself that nobody else knew. But David also knew that he wasn't afraid. If he had been asked, he would have been glad to go. Send me to battle. He would have walked out there willingly. He would have done whatever he was asked to do. But he had been tasked with keeping the sheep. And you know what David did? Every single day, David went to the field. David went to the pasture. David got out there. He fought off the lions. He fought off bears. He probably killed wolves. He run off intruders. And he probably killed robbers and thieves. He had defended those sheep with his own life, with a lot of skill, with a lot of tenacity, with a lot of dedication and commitment and self-pride. He took pride in what he was doing. Not all pride is bad, contrary to popular opinion. Not all pride is bad. You can have a lot of pride in what you do and the way that you go about it and not be prideful to a fault. David was dedicated to his job. So when word came down, hey, we're having a parade out here and God's going to pick one of these boys to lead this thing from here on out, David said, you know, I'm probably not all that useful, because he was humble. He's meek. He said, but my job is to watch the sheep, and I'm going to go be about my Father's business until my time comes. And David chose to go to the pasture. And when God came looking for the next king, God was not looking for somebody who wanted to stand in the parade. God wanted somebody who would rather be in the pasture, because leadership qualities and God's authority and God's power and God's promotion and God's anointing never falls on the people who are trying to attain it. It falls rather on the ones who just kind of fall into it, so to speak. David was looking to do the job that he had been tasked to do as faithful as he could do it. And God said, I see your heart, David, and I know you're going to fail. And I know you're going to be a wretched soul a lot of times. And I'm going to be disappointed in you. And I'm going to be ashamed of you. And there's going to be times I probably would like to choke you. And there's going to be times people are going to lose their life because of you. And I'm not happy about that. But I know your heart. And your heart is to faithfully and courageously, with a lot of tenacity and passion, go out here and do what I have called you to do, and that's lead. But before David could ever be anointed, David had to go and sanctify himself. And he had to go and get cleaned up. And he had to come and take his place at the end of the parade. I tell you this morning, what God is trying to say to all of us is, if you want God to work in your life, stop trying to be number one in the parade. Get faithful about what God has you doing right now. Grow and bloom in the place where He has planted you. Be faithful in the little things and watch Him make you ruler over many things. Do you want to do big things for God in your life? Ask yourself that question this morning. Do I want to do big things for God? Then you better be diligent to do the small things that He's already entrusted you with. And do them the right way. Do it in a way that honors and pleases God.